The Vrax hegemony's flagship, inevitable conquest, sliced through the darkness of space, its obsidian hull absorbing rather than reflecting light. Commander Zax Tour stood before the viewscreen, his scarlet eyes narrowing at the blue-green planet growing larger in the display. His facial plates shifted in a gesture of anticipation as he flexed claws that could tear through steel. 17 worlds have fallen before us. He addressed his bridge officers, each believing themselves special, each ultimately kneeling. The officers' throat sacs pulsed in synchronized agreement, a biological quirk that made the Vrax military eerily coordinated. Their species had evolved from pack-hunting apex predators, with natural armor, enhanced strength, and pheromone communication that enabled perfect battlefield synchronization. Below deck, the scout Kivleth sorted through the reconnaissance, gathered over 6 months of covered Earth observation. Her report had designated humans as conquest-ready, a species with useful resources, but insufficient defenses. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans spent more time fighting among themselves than preparing for external threats. They based decisions on emotions rather than logic. Most damning, their technology, while advancing quickly, relied on fragile infrastructure that could be easily targeted. Their military forces are divided by arbitrary geographical boundaries. Kivleth explained, displaying a map of Earth's nations to her commander. They cannot even agree on basic forms of governance. Some worship invisible deities. Others accumulate meaningless currency. They are perpetually distracted. Zax Tour chittered with amusement as he reviewed footage of human conflicts. Primitive, localized, and restrained by self-imposed rules of engagement. They fight without purpose, he noted. They have never faced a species like ours. As the Vrax Armada entered the solar system with stealth drives engaged, they deploy their psychological weapon, a simple transmission across all frequencies containing coordinates that map their coming conquest path. It was not a warning, but a terror tactic. On 17 other worlds, this knowledge alone had shattered resistance before the first Vrax soldier made planetfall. Begin the approach sequence, Zax Tour ordered, and prepare my ceremonial armor. I want to be appropriately dressed when I accept their surrender. The inevitable conquest surged forward, flanked by 12 destroyer-class vessels. None of them activated their shields yet. Why waste energy when the humans possessed nothing that could harm them? On the tactical deck, war strategist Makver finalized the invasion sequence. The plan was elegant in its simplicity, refined through 17 successful conquests. First, blind their communications. Second, destroy their defensive capabilities. Third, demonstrate overwhelming force against population centers until their leaders capitulated. Fourth, establish control zones and begin resource extraction. The humans will be particularly easy to subjugate, Makver observed to his subordinates. Their psychological profiles indicate strong attachments to specific geographical locations they call homes. The threat of destroying these attachments should produce rapid compliance. What none of the Vrax officers discussed, because none considered it remotely possible, was failure. The conquest of Earth was not a question of if, but when. Their intelligence indicated no unified planetary defense system, no advanced weapons that could penetrate hegemony shields, and no evidence that humans had ever encountered another spacefaring species. As the Armada passed the orbit of Mars, they detected primitive human outposts on the Red Planet and its moons. Zax Tour ordered their immediate destruction, not from any perceived threat, but as the opening move in the psychological campaign. Earth's long-range telescopes would detect the destruction, giving the humans their first taste of hegemony power. The energy weapons fired with precision, vaporizing the research stations in brilliant flashes visible from Earth. Zax Tour imagined the panic spreading across the blue planet as humans realized they were no longer alone in the universe, and that their visitors came not in peace, but in conquest. Prepare the landing shuttles, he commanded. Let us introduce ourselves properly to these humans. The Vrax hegemony had arrived, and as with 17 worlds before, They expected nothing less than complete submission. Dr. Aisha Kapoor hadn't slept in 36 hours. The young astrophysicist stared at her monitor in the Mumbai Space Research Facility, running the calculations again. The strange signal that had bombarded Earth's communication systems wasn't random noise, as her colleagues insisted. It contained a pattern, a trajectory. It's not just coordinates, she explained to the hastily assembled International Committee over video conference. It's a conquest map. These points mark where they've been and where they're going next. We're the endpoint. Officials from a dozen nations exchanged skeptical glances. The American representative spoke first. Doctor, with all due respect, this seems far-fetched. If this were truly. His dismissal was interrupted by an urgent message. On Mars, the Olympus Mons research station had gone silent. Seconds later, the Europa orbital platform followed. Within minutes, every human outpost beyond Earth's atmosphere had been systematically destroyed. Satellite footage captured a chilling image. Obsidian ships materializing above the Martian surface, unleashing energy weapons that vaporized the human installations. The demonstration was calculated and precise. Emergency sessions convened worldwide. Military commanders activated long-dormant protocols designed for improbable scenarios. News anchors struggled to maintain composure as they reported that humanity was no longer alone, and the visitors weren't friendly. 3 days later, the Vraks made their presence undeniable. Sleek shuttles descended simultaneously into 12 major cities, their hulls absorbing light in a way that made them appear as moving voids. From each emerged 3 figures, tall, armored beings with reptilian features and predatory movements. In Washington, D.C., the lead envoy strode confidently into the White House, protected by personal shield technology that had already proven impervious to bullets when nervous security forces opened fire in Beijing. The alien's voice emerged through a translation device, flat and emotionless. I speak for the Vraks hegemony. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. Your immediate surrender will be rewarded with the preservation of your major cultural sites and a survival rate of approximately 60% of your population. Resistance will result in a demonstration of hegemony military superiority followed by complete subjugation. You have 24 Earth hours to submit your formal capitulation. The Vraks envoy expected trembling acquiescence, the same fearful surrender witnessed on 17 conquered worlds. Instead, the human representatives bombarded him with questions. What weaknesses does your species have? How does your FTL drive function? Are there other galactic powers that oppose you? What happens to species that resist? On the command ship, Zaxtor watched the exchanges with bewilderment. The humans weren't begging for mercy or preparing surrender terms. They were conducting interviews, gathering data, probing for exploitable information. Even more strangely, civilians had surrounded the landing sites not with offerings but with recording devices, capturing every detail of the Vraks' physiology and technology. They're in denial, he concluded to his officers. This information gathering is meaningless resistance. What could questioning possibly achieve against our inevitable victory? Outside the New York landing site, a team of linguists worked feverishly to analyze the Vraks language. In Tokyo, engineers studied recordings of the alien shuttles, identifying potential propulsion mechanisms. In Cairo, biologists collected environmental samples where the aliens had walked, searching for biological traces. As the 24-hour deadline approached, Zaxtor's communication officer reported something unexpected. Rather than surrender terms, the humans had sent a counterproposal requesting a cultural exchange and diplomatic negotiations. Zaxtor's facial plates flared in amusement. Prepare the first strike package, he ordered. These humans require a more persuasive demonstration. Little did he know that Earth scientists had already begun piecing together crucial information about Vraks' biology, technology, and tactics, all extracted from the brief landing encounters. While the aliens saw only chaotic questioning, Humanity was executing a coordinated intelligence-gathering operation, unlike anything the hegemony had encountered in their 17 previous conquests. "Commence Phase 1. Zaxtor ordered, his voice carrying the casual tone of someone who had executed this same operation 17 times before. The Vrax attack unfolded with practiced precision. Violet energy beams lanced from destroyer vessels, carving through Earth's satellite network. Military communications platforms erupted into molten debris, GPS constellations fragmented, intelligence-gathering satellites vaporized. Within 9 minutes, 80% of Earth's orbital infrastructure had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated particles. Blind the prey before the hunt. War strategist Mokver quoted from ancient Vrax military doctrine as he observed the destruction. Phase 2 is ready, Commander. Tactical strikes against planetary defense systems commence on your order. Zaxtor raised a clawed hand to give the command, but hesitated as warning indicators flashed across his command console. 3 of his destroyer-class vessels were reporting cascading system failures. Navigation controls locked, weapons arrays powered down, life support fluctuating. Impossible, the ship's engineer hissed, mandibles clicking in agitation. There are no defensive weapons targeting our vessels. How could they? Her question died as the answer appeared on their screens. Earth's remaining functional satellites had simultaneously changed their broadcast patterns, bombarding the hegemony ships with seemingly random data packets. The transmissions appeared harmless. Weather reports, entertainment broadcasts, financial data. But hidden within were algorithmic sequences specifically designed to exploit vulnerabilities in alien computer systems. They've weaponized their communication networks, the cybersecurity officer reported with reluctant admiration. Each data stream contains fragments of attack code that reassemble once inside our systems. I've never seen this approach before. On Earth, the human response to the orbital assault appeared chaotic at first glance. The United States activated its experimental laser defense grid. China deployed electromagnetic pulse generators. Russia launched kinetic interceptors. India initiated its cyber warfare protocols. Brazil redirected civilian communication through hardened military networks. This lack of standardization initially struck the Vrax as primitive, but soon revealed itself as a profound tactical challenge. Their automated targeting systems, calibrated for unified defense networks, struggled against the variability of human countermeasures. Target their power infrastructure, Zaxtor ordered, following the standard conquest playbook. Without electricity, their resistance will collapse. The remaining functional Vrax ships unleashed precision strikes against power stations across North America, only to discover the targets had already been powered down. Backup generators and localized microgrids activated in their place, maintaining essential services while presenting smaller distributed targets. They're sacrificing their technological comforts, Mokvar observed with confusion, willingly regressing to preserve strategic capability. In low Earth orbit, Vrax sensors detected a ragtag fleet approaching their position. Mining vessels, corporate shuttles, and research platforms hastily retrofitted with crude weapons. The hegemony officers chittered with derision at these primitive vessels. Swat these annoyances away, Zaxtor ordered dismissively. The makeshift human fleet accelerated to collision trajectories. Vrax gunners targeted the lead vessels, vaporizing several instantly. Others exploded prematurely from weapon impacts, releasing clouds of metallic dust that absorbed subsequent energy weapon discharges. Beneath this chaotic screen, 12 retrofitted mining drones slipped through defensive gaps, latching onto the hull of the Vrax destroyer unquestioned might. The nuclear charges they carried detonated in a precisely choreographed sequence, not simultaneously as Vrax shields were calibrated to withstand, but in a complex pattern that created resonance cascades through the defensive field. The unquestioned might broke apart in a spectacular explosion. Debris from the destroyed vessel slammed into a second Vrax ship, the inevitable victory, causing critical damage to its propulsion systems. On the bridge of the inevitable conquest, absolute silence fell as officers stared at the tactical display. Two hegemony warships, technological marvels that had conquered multiple worlds, destroyed by converted mining equipment and primitive nuclear weapons. Tactical retreat, Zaxtor ordered, his voice quiet but tense. Regroup at the dark side of their moon. We need to reassess. In his private battle log, he added a note unprecedented in his military career. The humans are unexpectedly resourceful. Standard conquest protocols may be insufficient. In the United Nations General Assembly Hall, representatives from 193 nations watched in stunned silence as longtime enemies shook hands across the aisle. The American president embraced her Russian counterpart. Israeli and Palestinian delegates stood shoulder to shoulder. North and South Korean representatives tore up the armistice papers in a symbolic gesture of unity. We have spent centuries fighting over our differences, the Secretary General addressed the assembly, her voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. Today, we recognize that those differences may be our greatest strength against an enemy that has never encountered diversity of thought. In corporate boardrooms worldwide, equally remarkable scenes unfolded. The CEOs of competing tech giants authorized complete access to their patent libraries. Pharmaceutical companies pooled research data accumulated over decades. Defense contractors shared proprietary weapon designs. A spirit of collaboration replaced cutthroat competition with stunning speed. From their lunar observation post, the Vraks watched this transformation with growing unease. Their intelligence officers had identified Earth's political fragmentation as its critical vulnerability. Instead, those divisions were becoming an incomprehensible advantage. The hegemony launched its next offensive. A coordinated communication blackout across North America. Satisfaction rippled through the Vraks command when the continent went dark, only to turn to confusion when European systems immediately took over routing functions through previously unknown backup protocols. When they jammed Asian satellite communications, submarine cables redirected through African servers. They'd prepared redundancies across political boundaries. The Vraks communications officer reported, mandibles twitching nervously. Their fragmentation creates resilience rather than vulnerability. The Vraks Biological Warfare Division deployed a tailored pathogen over densely populated regions of China, expecting to create chaos and resource drain. Within hours, treatment protocols developed in Nigerian laboratories were being implemented by Chinese doctors. The mortality rate remained negligible. How could they develop countermeasures so quickly? Demanded the biological warfare commander. The answer came from intelligence reports. Humans had been theorizing about alien pathogens in their medical literature for decades. They had conceptual frameworks ready for defending against bioweapons they had never encountered. Most alarming to Zaxtor were the technical reports streaming in from salvage teams. Debris from damaged Vraks vessels had been recovered by human forces, and preliminary analysis suggested they were already reverse engineering key components. The Rylaxians took 7 years to understand our propulsion technology, muttered Zaxtor. Humans are deciphering it in days. The hegemony unleashed its most reliable conquest tool. The Dominion brigades, elite shock troops genetically enhanced for terror operations. 10,000 warriors descended on major population centers, their battle cries designed to resonate at frequencies that induced panic in most sentient species. In New York, construction workers collapsed half-finished skyscrapers onto Vraks formations. In Mumbai, chemistry teachers from local universities synthesized compounds that disrupted the aliens' pheromone communication network, leaving squads unable to coordinate. In Rio de Janeiro, teenagers deployed traps using principles from physics classes and designs eerily inspired by video games. These are civilians, reported a bewildered Vraks field commander, mandibles chattering in distress. Untrained, unarmored, yet they fight with the creativity of seasoned warriors. The Vraks tactical officer's report was stark. The humans appear to be learning with each engagement, adapting faster than we can adjust our strategies. They communicate effective resistance methods across linguistic and geographical boundaries. Previously disconnected human networks now function as a singular evolving defense organism, while maintaining the unpredictability of independent units. Zach's tour stared at the casualty figures with disbelief. The Dominion brigades were reporting 40% losses with minimal territorial gains. What had begun as a standard conquest operation was becoming something the Vraks had never experienced before, a genuinely contested war. They should be broken by now, Zach's tour hissed to his executive officer. Why aren't they broken? Perhaps, the officer suggested hesitantly, what we identified as their fundamental weakness, their division, is actually something else entirely. The War Council chamber aboard the inevitable Conquest had never felt so tense. Zach's tour's facial plates were pulled tight against his skull, a sign of extreme stress recognized by all present, but acknowledged by none. Around the obsidian table, his senior officers displayed similarly restrained distress signals, stiffened postures, dulled scale coloration, suppressed pheromone production. Present your findings, Zach's tour ordered the cultural analysis officer, a specialist rarely consulted during active conquests. The holographic display activated, showing a montage of human entertainment media. Scenes of alien invasions played out across the screen, some depicting reptilian conquerors eerily similar to the Vraks themselves. I have reviewed approximately 6,000 examples of human fiction across their recorded history, the cultural officer reported. They have a unique concept unknown in any other species we have encountered, the systematic creation of elaborate falsehoods purely for entertainment and speculation. The council watched in growing discomfort as the display showed humans defending against alien invasions using tactics remarkably similar to those they were now employing against the hegemony. This film, called Independence Day, depicts humans uploading computer viruses to alien systems, the officer continued. It predates our arrival by nearly 3 decades. This one, Edge of Tomorrow, explores adaptive combat learning against a technologically superior force. Ender's Game examines swarm tactics against larger vessels. The information security officer's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of intense agitation. Are you suggesting they somehow knew we were coming? No, replied the cultural officer. I am suggesting something far more disturbing. They have been mentally rehearsing for this exact scenario for generations. Not because they knew we specifically would arrive, but because they have systematically imagined thousands of possible first contact scenarios, mostly hostile ones, as a form of entertainment. Zach's tour leaned forward. Entertainment. They derive pleasure from imagining their own potential extinction. They call it speculative fiction. They have been playing out countless scenarios of interstellar conflict in their literature, films, and interactive entertainment. What's more, they have been imagining themselves as both the invaded and the invaders. The revelation stunned the Vraks leadership into silence. Their species had evolved as conquerors, with warfare encoded in their biology and culture. Yet humans, physically weaker, technologically less advanced, had been preparing psychologically for this moment through their collective imagination. I've identified over 47,000 works of fiction, specifically depicting alien invasions, the cultural officer continued, dating back centuries. These aren't military simulations. They're mass entertainment consumed by billions of humans across generations. The intelligence officer displayed intercepted transmissions from human military channels. Their defense strategies draw directly from these fictional scenarios. They refer to them by name in tactical communications. A human commander in Beijing explicitly referenced a Starship Troopers maneuver when coordinating a counterattack. On the tactical display, red warning indicators flashed. Human forces had breached the perimeter of 3 Vraks support vessels. The security feeds showed human soldiers moving with unexpected familiarity through alien corridors. How are they navigating our ships so effectively? Demanded the security chief. The cultural officer pulled up another human entertainment product, a game called Alien Infiltration, with procedurally generated spaceship layouts. They'd been practicing virtually for decades, not for our ships specifically, but for the general problem of navigating unknown alien environments under pressure. Zach's tour stared at the display, mandibles tight against his face. They created practice scenarios for a threat they had no concrete evidence even existed. Yes, Commander, the cultural officer confirmed. And not just a few specialized military personnel. Their entire civilization participates in this speculative preparation through entertainment. A shocked silence fell across the War Council as the implications became clear. While the Vraks struggled to adapt to unexpected resistance, humanity had been preparing for this moment their entire existence. We have conquered 17 species, Zach's tour said quietly, none of which had imagined us before we arrived. But humans have been imagining us, or something like us, for their entire recorded history, finished the cultural officer. Nothing we do truly surprises them. 6 weeks into the war, Kivleth, the Vraks intelligence officer who had initially classified humans as conquest-ready, stared at surveillance footage with mandibles slack in disbelief. According to all historical precedent, human resistance should be crumbling as infrastructure failed and casualties mounted. Instead, she was witnessing something unprecedented. Earth's industrial capacity was expanding exponentially under pressure. In Detroit, automotive assembly lines that once produced luxury vehicles now manufactured armored personnel carriers with integrated countermeasures against Vraks weapons. Workers operated around the clock in shifts, sleeping on cots beside their stations. Engineers made design improvements between production runs, each iteration more effective than the last. In Bangalore, pharmaceutical research facilities had transformed into biological warfare defense centers. Scientists who once developed treatments for human diseases now synthesized compounds that specifically disrupted Vraks' pheromone communication systems. Clinical trials that normally took years were compressed into days through parallel testing and rapid data sharing. Most disturbing were the images from Silicon Valley, where technology firms had created a collaborative campus entirely underground. There, engineers worked with salvaged Vraks components, not merely reverse engineering them, but fundamentally reimagining their applications. A recovered hegemony energy transmitter had been converted into a shield-penetrating weapon more efficient than the original design. "I don't understand," Kivleth confessed to her commanding officer. "Their approach defies all logic. There's no central authority directing this effort, no unified plan. Different facilities pursue different solutions simultaneously, many of which fail. It's chaotic, redundant, and inefficient. And yet," responded her superior with a gesture of grim acknowledgement, "the results are undeniable. What took the hegemony decades of careful advancement, humans accomplished through what they called innovation sprints. Concentrated bursts of creative problem-solving by diverse teams working in parallel. Solutions emerged not from hierarchical direction, but from a competitive yet collaborative process that produced results with stunning speed." Inside a repurposed underground particle accelerator facility in Switzerland, a newly formed international weapons development team demonstrated their latest creation. The device, cobbled together from Vraks components, Earth technologies, and novel materials, generated a field that temporarily neutralized the aliens' natural armor advantage. "We call it the soft shell," explained the lead engineer, a young woman who had been designing video game hardware 3 weeks earlier. "It exploits a molecular resonance frequency in their exoskeletons that our biologists identified. The Vraks never discovered this vulnerability because they evolved with this biology. They had no reason to study it as a potential weakness." Similar breakthroughs occurred daily across every field of human endeavor. Linguists cracked significant portions of the Vraks communication codes. Metallurgists developed alloys that mimicked the properties of hegemony hull materials. Teenage hackers identified exploitable patterns in Vraks combat algorithms. Aboard the inevitable conquest, Zach's tour received the latest intelligence briefing with growing horror. New human weapons were precisely targeting vulnerabilities in Vraks' defensive systems, vulnerabilities the hegemony themselves hadn't recognized in technologies they had used for centuries. How can their haphazard approach yield such precise results? He demanded of his science officer. They call it parallel processing, she explained reluctantly. While we perfect a single approach methodically, they pursue hundreds simultaneously, immediately discarding failures and rapidly iterating successes. They embrace thousands of small failures to achieve breakthroughs. Zach's tour, facing the first serious defeat of his career, made a decision that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Order all forces to withdraw from Earth's atmosphere, he commanded, his voice tight with suppressed rage. We require reinforcements to continue this operation. His executive officer's facial plates drew back in shock. Commander, retreat is unprecedented in hegemony conquest operations. This is not retreat, Zach's tour snapped. It is strategic redeployment. He transmitted his reinforcement request to Hegemony Central Command, still certain that superior numbers would eventually prevail. The response he received shattered his remaining confidence. Other Vrax conquest fleets were experiencing similar setbacks. Humanity wasn't just defending Earth. Their off-world colonies were launching counteroffensives. 3 months after first contact, Zach's tour stood on the bridge of the inevitable conquest, watching the tactical display with growing dread. The unthinkable was happening. Human forces were launching a major offensive against the Hegemony fleet. Their approach makes no tactical sense, muttered the Vrax battle coordinator, mandibles clicking in agitation. They're deploying thousands of small craft in completely chaotic patterns. There's no formation, no concentration of force. It violates every principle of space warfare. The display showed a bewildering array of human vessels, retrofitted civilian ships, hastily assembled fighters, and converted satellites, swarming toward the Vrax positions like insects. Their movements appeared random, even suicidal, with no discernible strategy. They're sacrificing their vessels as diversions, Zach's tour realized too late. Target the larger ships. But the Hegemony's targeting systems, designed to predict enemy movements based on standard military doctrine, struggled to lock onto the erratically moving human craft. While the Vrax ships engaged the decoys, specialized human strike teams had already breached their perimeter, boarding key vessels with surgical precision. Unlike the Vrax, who relied on biological uniformity and standardized tactics, these human boarding teams displayed bewildering specialization. Some members demonstrated strength and endurance that rivaled the Vrax themselves, the result of genetic enhancement programs accelerated by the war effort. Others showed technical expertise that allowed them to repurpose Vrax systems against their creators. They've accessed the environmental controls on the merciless subjugation, reported the security officer. They're flooding the ship with a compound that neutralizes our pheromone communication. Without their chemical signaling, the Vrax warriors aboard the vessel could no longer coordinate as a unit. Individual soldiers found themselves making decisions independently, something their training had never prepared them for. Most disturbing to the Hegemony commanders was humanity's psychological warfare. Humans had deciphered enough of the Vrax language to broadcast directly to alien troops, not with threats but with offers. The Hegemony has lost 17 of your ships. They consider you expendable. We don't. Surrender and you will be treated with dignity. Your wounded will receive medical care. You have 10 minutes to decide. Similar messages went out to members of recently conquered species serving in the Hegemony ranks. The broadcasts promised technological exchange rather than domination, alliances instead of subjugation. Some Vrax, particularly from the newest conquered worlds, began questioning centuries of expansionist ideology. 3 vessels report internal insurrections, the communications officer announced, his voice tight with disbelief. Security teams are engaging both humans and our own auxiliary forces. As Zach's tour ordered the remaining fleet to pull back from Earth's orbit, his science officer delivered the most devastating news yet. Commander, we've detected human ships approaching the Rylaxian system. Impossible, Zach's tour hissed. They couldn't have developed interstellar capability so quickly. The evidence on his screen proved otherwise. Somehow, Humanity had reverse-engineered the hegemony's faster-than-light technology and improved its efficiency. The species that was supposed to be conquered was now bringing the fight to Vrax territory. An urgent transmission from Hegemony Central Command flashed on the primary screen, a directive unprecedented in their expansionist history. All conquest fleets withdraw immediately from human sphere of influence. Defensive positions only. Preserve core fleet assets at all costs. Zack's tour stared at the order in stunned silence. For the first time in their history, the hegemony faced not just resistance, but potential defeat. In the rear command chamber, the cultural officer updated his final report on human psychology. Their greatest weapon is not technological but cognitive, the ability to imagine futures that do not exist, then bring them into reality. The hegemony has no defense against an enemy that can envision victory when all evidence suggests defeat. 1 year after the Vrax attempted invasion, a sleek vessel approached the border of hegemony space. Unlike the aggressive silhouettes of warships, this craft featured graceful lines and transparent viewing ports that revealed its occupants, a gesture of openness unthinkable in Vrax culture. The ship's designation broadcast on all frequencies: Earth Diplomatic Vessel Unity. Inside the hegemony border station, Vrax officials observed the approaching ship with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. For the first time in their expansionist history, an enemy had not only repelled their forces, but had pursued them to their own territory, and then, inexplicably, offered to talk. The Unity carried representatives from Earth's nations, corporations, and academic institutions, a diverse group that still puzzled the Vrax with its lack of clear hierarchy. As they disembarked at the neutral meeting station, the humans presented a strange sight: different heights, colors, ages, and attire. Some wore ceremonial military uniforms, others business attire, still others the simple garments of scholars or spiritual leaders. Zack's tour, now serving on the hegemony's diplomatic council, his military career having ended with his failure to conquer Earth, observed the proceedings with keen interest. His facial plates, once proudly flared in dominance displays, now remained neutral, a posture he had adopted since witnessing the impossible defeat of his fleet. The human delegation's leader, a woman whose gray hair indicated advanced age by their standards, addressed the assembled Vrax officials directly. "We come with a proposal unprecedented in your history," she stated without preamble. "Not surrender, not even a truce, but peace between equals. We recognize your right to exist and develop as a civilization, just as we ask you to recognize ours." Murmurs rippled through the Vrax delegation. The concept of equality with a conquered, or in this case, unconquerable, species had no precedent in their culture. "And if we refuse?" asked the hegemony high commander, mandibles flaring slightly in challenge. A human military officer stepped forward. "We could continue this conflict. Our projections indicate we would prevail within 2 standard years." He placed a data crystal on the table containing evidence of human fleet movements already penetrating hegemony supply lines. "But we see no value in unnecessary destruction." What followed stunned the Vrax observers. The humans didn't just present terms. They listened. They asked questions about Vrax biology, governance structures, and cultural priorities. They identified common interests and proposed collaborative solutions to shared challenges. "Your species' expansionist drive is not inherently wrong," noted a human anthropologist. "Properly channeled, it could make you valuable partners in exploring unknown regions of the galaxy, areas where we lack experience but you excel." Most shocking of all, the humans offered technological and cultural exchange that would benefit both species, not as tribute, but as equal partners. As the negotiations concluded, an elder Vrax, a veteran of their first expansion centuries ago, addressed the human delegation. "How did your species resist so effectively when 17 others fell? What is your secret weapon?" The diplomatic leader smiled. "We've always been divided by geography, ideology, and culture. These divisions forced us to become experts at adapting to different perspectives, at finding compromise, at imagining alternatives. We never knew the comfort of complete unity, so we developed the skills to thrive amid diversity and change. 3 days later, the Vracs hegemony signed the first equal treaty in their history. It recognized humanity not just as another spacefaring species, but as representatives of a fundamentally different approach to existence, one that valued innovation over tradition, diversity over uniformity, and adaptation over perfection. As the human ship departed, Zach's tour found himself experiencing something new: curiosity about what the Vracs might become through peaceful exchange. The humans called it growth mindset, the idea that even ancient civilizations could learn, adapt, and evolve. Perhaps, he thought, that was humanity's most powerful technology of all.